Good to see all of you here today. Quickly, before we get into our class, I would just remind you that there are 3 adult classes offered on Sunday morning. I know it'll probably take a couple of weeks to get used to this. For the ladies at least, there are 3 adult classes. So Kathy's ladies class is in the annex. And then there are 2 adult classes for men or women. This one in here, of course, where we're looking at from the tabernacle to temples. And then in the annex, in the front part of the annex, Josh Webster's teaching a class on the Lord's Supper. So, if you would rather go to one of those other classes, you will not hurt my feelings at all if you want to get up and go to one of the other classes. That will be fine. I know it will take a few weeks to get used to this new schedule. I'll say again, I appreciate our elders and taking what amounted to months and discussing this, listening, hearing, praying about it, and trying to figure out the very, very best for the congregation as a whole here at Wood Avenue. So here we are. Let's begin with a prayer. Then I'll tell you a little bit about the class that we're going to have in here on Sunday mornings. Let's pray. Our God and Holy Father in heaven, we're thankful for this beautiful day that you have given us in this time of the year. And the opportunity, Father, that we have to come together this morning for Bible study hour. We're grateful for all the teachers. We're grateful for all who are here. We're grateful for all the parents and grandparents who have their children here. And we're thankful, Father, for this congregation. We're thankful, Father, when we think back the history of it and all who have helped to make this congregation what it is today. And we pray that we would continue in that effort and being faithful to you and to your word and being a shining light in this community and always giving you the glory. Bless us in our classes, in our study. Help us always to seek to please you. In Jesus' name, amen. Our study for this quarter is from the tabernacle to temples. The tabernacle to temples. And I've never taught this series of lessons or class like this, so I'm writing the material as I go. I think the schedule will look something like this. Today's lesson, building the tabernacle. So we're just going to look at the structure of it and the building the tabernacle. Next week, Lord willing, items inside the tabernacle. Proper placement and transportation of the tabernacle. Then we'll look at the priest. After that, worship and sacrifices in the tabernacle. Class 6, the tabernacle in the book of Hebrews. Then we'll transition with class 7 into Solomon's temple. After that, we'll look at Jesus and Herod's temple. Then the church as the temple. Christians as the temple. Christians as priests. And finally, the eternal temple. And that'll take us to the end of November, Lord willing. There are 13 classes in any given quarter. So that was 12 if you were counting. Because later on in October, we'll be gone for 1 week. So I'll not be here for 1 week. So that's 12 of the 13 classes. This lesson on building the tabernacle really challenged me. It really challenged me. And I'm saying that to say it really drew me closer to God. And so I hope it in some way can do the same for you. And looking at the detail and what God wanted from His people in building this tabernacle, it's just amazing. And I hope that this will be a great introduction for what will come later when we start looking at we as the people, as today's temple of God, and the church is today's temple of God. I hope that this can serve as a great background. Most of our study will come from Exodus chapter 26. If you would like to go ahead and open your Bible to Exodus chapter 26. Now, I do not have a detailed PowerPoint this morning. I just have the picture on the screen. And by the way, this is not mine. It comes from Rose Book Publishing. I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's down in that bottom corner. But this is something I purchased from Rose Book Publishing, and so that's not my work. But I do have notes, of course, and let me say that if you ever want a copy of the notes, I'll be happy to share them with you. But following the Exodus from Egypt, and during the period of time known as the wilderness wanderings, God gave Moses instructions to build the tabernacle. So keep in mind, we're with the book of Exodus beginning, the people of Israel, they're in Egypt. They don't have their own land. Okay, they're becoming a nation as they're growing and multiplying, but they don't have their land. They were a nation before having a land, quite reversed from all others. But God, as you know, would lead Israel out of Egypt, across the Red Sea, and into the wilderness. And that's the setting. That's where we are. We're out here in the period of time known as the wilderness wanderings. And while there, God would instruct Moses how to build this tabernacle. Because remember, not only are they going out on their own now, but this is also going to be a transition for them. Okay? Up to this point, it's always been a patriarchal system. God would give the instructions directly to the patriarchs, to the male leadership. And then he, in return, would instruct, of course, his family, with Adam, with Noah, with Abraham, and then Abraham's sons, of course. So up to this point, they've been under a patriarchal system. With the wilderness wanderings comes in the Mosaical period of time, or sometimes called the Jewish period of time. So they're out here in the wilderness. God has given them instructions for this tabernacle, but he's given them all these other instructions and commands. The law is what he's giving them, and that goes back, as we see in Exodus chapter 20, with the giving of the 10 commandments, and then more commandments to follow. So God is teaching these people how to be a nation, what they need to do to be a nation. And a lot of what God taught them is familiar to us, because this nation was founded largely in part on Judeo-Christian beliefs. So a lot of our founding in this nation would go back to what you see in the books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So God would give them this law, ushering in a new period of time, the Mosaical period of time. And with doing so, he instructs them to build this tabernacle. And as I said, we're going to spend most of our time at Exodus 26. If you want to do a little more reading this week, read Exodus 26 and 27, chapter 36, and chapter 38. Okay, there's 4 chapters. Exodus chapter 26, Exodus chapter 27, Exodus chapter 36, and Exodus chapter 38. So what it is in chapter 26, you read the instructions for building the tabernacle. In chapter 20, well, let me say it this way. In chapter 36, you read them again. Okay? So chapter 26 and 36 go together. Then in Exodus chapter 27, the instructions for the courtyard around the area around. And then you read about that again in Exodus chapter 38. God gave Israel specific instructions about how to build the tabernacle. Now, I want to notice with you, you can keep your ribbon marker in Exodus 26 because that's where we're going to spend most of our time. But by way of introduction, Exodus chapter 25 and verse 8 beginning. I'm reading from the New King James. Exodus chapter 25 and verse 8 beginning. God gave Israel instructions about building this tabernacle. He said, "Let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them." You'll hear it called sanctuary. You'll hear it called tabernacle. You'll hear it called tent throughout the Bible. "According to all that I show you, that is, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, just so you shall make it." What you're going to see in the building of this tabernacle, God was very specific, very detailed on what to use and how to use it, and the length, And all that was very important. And again, to me, as I was preparing this lesson, I'm thinking, God really means what he says when he says that Christians are the temple of God, and we better do it the way God says to do it. And that's very important that we realize that. I want to jump over to the New Testament for a moment. Remember, the New Testament and Old Testament work hand in hand. Acts chapter 7. Acts chapter 7. You remember the gospel preacher Stephen preaches this great and powerful sermon that ends sadly in his death. But what he does, we're going to look at verses 44 through 47. What he does is he kind of gives a history. Paul did that in some of his sermons. When talking to the Israelites, he would give them a history, an overview of how they got to where they were. And say, yes, Christ is the fulfillment of everything that Abraham and Moses and all these others were looking forward to. In Acts chapter 7 and verse 44 beginning, our fathers had the tabernacle of witness in the wilderness. That's why we title it the Wilderness Wanderings. As he appointed, instructing Moses to make it according to the pattern that he had seen. Notice that. Moses had to instruct it according to the pattern. Everything had to be built exactly the way God said to do it. Not only that, we'll see in a few weeks, the people of Israel, they had certain places to camp around the tabernacle. Okay, they couldn't just set up shop and say, "Oh, this is a nice area. I like the sunrise. So I want this place." They had where they were all had designated areas of camping around the tabernacle. It was very detailed. Okay, verse 45, which our fathers, having received it in return, also brought with Joshua into the land possessed by the Gentiles. We're going to mention in a minute, this was a tent-like structure. It was not permanent. The temple later, when Solomon builds the temple, permanent, of course. But this is something that they can take it down and they can move it. They can transport it with them. So Joshua took it into the land possessed by the Gentiles, whom God drove out before the face of our fathers until the days of David, who found favor before God and asked to find a dwelling for the God of Jacob. But Solomon built him a house, Acts chapter 7 and verse 47. So, all the way through the days of David, no temple. No temple. David wanted to build the house. God wouldn't allow it. Solomon builds the temple. Notice then Hebrews chapter 8. I mentioned the 4 chapters to study in the book of Exodus, if you want to go back and read more about the building the tabernacle. But I would also encourage you throughout this quarter, from now until the end of November, I would encourage you to read the book of Hebrews often. It's only 13 chapters. You can read it easily in one sitting if you want to. But, at 2 chapters a day, you can read it every week. I would spend a lot of time with Hebrews while studying this particular study on Sunday morning. Hebrews chapter 8, beginning in verse 1. Now this is the main point of the things we are saying. We have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heavens, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle which the Lord erected and not man. For every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices. Therefore it is necessary that this one also have something to offer. For if he were on earth, he would not be a priest, since there are priests who offer the gifts according to the law, who serve the copy and shadow of the heavenly things, as Moses was divinely instructed when he was about to make the tabernacle. For he said, "See that you make all things according to the pattern shown you on the mountain." Hebrews chapter 8, verses 1 through 5. So it's a little introduction points to that. A couple more before we get into building the tabernacle. A writer pointed this out, something I never really noticed, and I'm going to double check as I go back and study the book of Hebrews again. But he noticed that the Hebrews writer uses the tabernacle to compare Christians, not the temple. And I thought that was an interesting observation. I'm going to double check. You double check that as well as you study the book of Hebrews. But moving on, going back to the book of Exodus, this time chapter 35, you're thinking, man, You said 26. I promise. We're getting there. I promise. This is just some introductory remarks. Exodus chapter 35. In building this tabernacle and the materials needed, the people had a willing mind and giving attitude to help complete this project. And that's what, of course, we need to have today, a willing mind, a giving attitude to help do the work of the church. In Exodus chapter 35, Exodus chapter 35, beginning in verse 20, and all the congregation of the children of Israel departed from the presence of Moses. Then everyone came whose heart was stirred, and everyone whose spirit was willing. And they brought the Lord's offering for the work of the tabernacle of meeting, for all its services, and for the holy garments. They came, both men and women, as many as had a willing heart, brought earrings and nose rings, rings and necklaces, all jewelry of gold, that is, every man who made an offering of gold to the Lord. And every man with whom was found blue, purple, or scarlet thread, fine linen, goat's hair, red skins of rams, badger skins, and brought them. Everyone who offered an offering of silver or bronze brought the Lord's offering. And everyone with whom was found acacia wood for any work of the services brought it. All the women who were gifted artisans spun yarn with their hands and brought what they had spun of blue, purple, and scarlet and fine linen. And all the women whose hearts stirred with wisdom spun yarn of goat's hair. See, all of this is the material being used to build the tabernacle, as we're going to see in a moment. Verse 27, the rulers brought onyx stones and the stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate, spices and oil for the light, for the anointing oil, and for the sweet incense. The children of Israel brought a freewill offering to the Lord. All the men and women whose hearts were willing to bring material for all kinds of work, which the Lord, by the hand of Moses, had commanded to be done. Then jump over to chapter 36 and verse 3. Exodus chapter 36 and verse 3. And they received from Moses all the offering which the children of Israel had brought for the work of the service of making the sanctuary. So they continued bringing to him freewill offerings every morning. Then all the craftsmen who were doing all the work of the sanctuary came, each from the work he was doing, and they spoke to Moses, saying, the people bring much more than enough for the service of the work which the Lord commanded us to do. That's a good problem to have, is it not? Verse 6, so Moses gave a commandment, and they caused it to be proclaimed throughout the camp, saying, let neither man nor woman do any more work for the offering of the sanctuary, and the people were restrained from bringing. For the material they had was sufficient for all the work to be done, indeed, too much. Good problem to have, but that was the attitude in this new nation forming out in the wilderness, ready to obey God and build a tabernacle. Now let's go to Exodus chapter 26. Exodus chapter 26. The tabernacle was rectangular in shape, and inside it was divided into two sections. The holy place and the most holy place, or sometimes called the Holy of Holies. Look at Exodus chapter 26 and verse 33. The veil shall be a divider for you between the holy place and the most holy. Exodus chapter 26 and verse 33. So now we're ready to look at building the tabernacle. We're going to notice, first of all, the tabernacle, the sanctuary, this inner part, okay? We're not talking about this outer part. We're not talking about the court fence. This is the court fence, courtyard area. We will discuss that before class is over today. But in the beginning, we're looking at this inner part, okay? And you can see it's that rectangular shape divided by the veil. It has a veil for entrance, of course, here. But then once you get in, it has a second veil. The veil that would divide this front part is the holy place where the priest would go in and minister, from the Holy of Holies, or the most holy place, where the high priest would go in once a year on the Day of Atonement. So this is what we're looking at right here for the beginning of our study, okay? The foundation of the tabernacle. Let's notice, first of all, the foundation of the tabernacle. As I mentioned, it was a portable tent-like structure. And as we go through this, and you notice the great detail, think about your life. think about how detailed God is in your life and what he wants for you. The foundation, if you look to Exodus chapter 38 and verse 27, the foundation consisted of 100 sockets or blocks or bases of silver. Now what we're going to find is the foundation here for the tabernacle, the bases along the bottom, the footing, if you will, it's of silver. When we get out here to the court fence, it's of bronze. So God was very, very detailed, and you're going to see that. But this was of silver, other than these pillars right here, and we'll talk about that later. The entrance side is always the east side. So they had a particular way to set this tabernacle up as they journey along. So the entrance is always the east. This side is always facing the west, the back side of the Holy of Holies. So you have the north side and the south side. So they had to always set it up the same way. And again, that's going to come into play in a few weeks when we talk about the families and their encampment around the tabernacle. So, Exodus chapter 38 and verse 27, from the 100 talents of silver were cast the sockets of the sanctuary and the bases of the veil. 100 sockets from the 100 talents, 1 talent for each socket. Now you go back to Exodus chapter 26, and we'll notice how they were to lay these out. So what you find is, again, this structure is not permanent. So they'll be able to take these up and move them as they go.
It's actually interesting you mentioned the east-west orientation, because Dr. Dale Manor at Harding, was a Bible professor there, he does archaeology at Tel Beth Shemesh in Israel. And he sent out a newsletter recently via email where he was talking about the Temple of Karnak in Egypt and how it was exactly the opposite. And so it was west-east instead of east-west. And in essence, by God setting it the other direction, he was basically saying, we're going the other way. You know, I want. In essence, it was sort of a. I'm trying to say it was basically saying, hey, you know, we're turning things around. We're not,
sure.
You know, we're not going the same way that we were doing things previously.
Interesting. David mentioned the temple in Egypt. If you didn't hear, the temple in Egypt being the exact opposite of the facing, the direction of the tabernacle that God had given. And so kind of as if we're going a different direction. Because Egypt, of course, had all their gods. Every plague was against an Egyptian god. So they had all their gods. So good. I didn't realize. Good observation. Thank you for that. If you go back now to Exodus chapter 26, verses 18 and 19. Verses 18 and 19. And what I'll probably do is give you the verses and maybe not read all of them. But verses 18 and 19, we find that there are 40 along the south side. So, we're talking about these sockets or these bases that would have been along the ground. Okay? So really, if you read Exodus chapter 26, verses 18 and 19, you find that there are 40 along the south side. Verses 20 and 21, 40 along the north side. So there's 40 and 40. There's 80 of our 100. And then if you continue on in Exodus chapter 26, verses 22 through 25, you find that there were 16 on the west side, the back. Now, those 16, 2 of them on either corner were served as corner boards. And so they would have been coupled together. They would have been staggered and coupled together. If you are into building, if you enjoy building and all of that, it would be really interesting to study the Bible and view God as an architect. And notice the detail of the tabernacle. Notice the detail to the ark and compare that. So what you have 40 and 40 is 80, and you have another 16 back here. That gives you 96. And then you have 4 under the pillars of the veil. So there's your 100 sockets or 100 bases. And that's all in Exodus chapter 26. The part that tells you about the veil, the pillars under the veil, verses 31 and 32. Then you find in Exodus chapter 26, verses 36 and 37, there were an additional 5 sockets made of bronze, or 5 bases made of bronze. And that's for your 5 pillars here. So in your main entrance into the tabernacle, you have 5 pillars. And these are bronze, just as was the courtyard fence. And then you have 4 pillars for the veil separating the holy place from the most holy place. And they were of silver, just like the other 3 side walls of the tabernacle. Okay? Then you get into the framework of the tabernacle. The framework consisting of 48 boards. Exodus chapter 26 and verse 15 beginning. For the tabernacle you shall make boards of acacia wood standing upright. So we're building the tabernacle. We're erecting the tabernacle. You have to, just like today, you have to have your foundation. Okay? But this isn't permanent. They can move with it. So they have their foundation in these bases. Now God's telling them how to do their boards. So there's going to be 48 in all. In Exodus chapter 26 and verse 18, you see that there were 20 boards used for the south side. So on the sides, the south side and the north side, 20 boards each. So 40 bases, 2 bases to each board, or 40 sockets, 2 to each. Okay? So on the south side, Exodus chapter 26 and verse 18, 20 boards. On the north side, Exodus chapter 26 and verse 20, another 20 boards. On the west side, or the what we might call the back, the west side, back of going from the entrance to the back, the west side, you find 8 boards. Exodus chapter 26, beginning in verse 22, for the side of the tabernacle westward you shall make 6 boards going across. There's your 6 boards going across. And you shall also make 2 boards for the back corners of the tabernacle. So there's your extra boards right there. So 20 down each side, 8 along the back. That gives you 48 boards. So these shall be coupled together at the bottom, and they shall be coupled together at the top by 1 ring. That shall be for both of them. They shall be for the corners. Next, you find, as you build this tabernacle, 15 bars overlaid with gold and attached to the frame. So you have your foundation, you have your walls, you have your framework, then you have these bars. 15. Not along the front, of course, because this is pillars with a veil, but along the sides and the back, you have 5 bars on each. 5 on this wall, 5 on this wall, and then 5 on the west side wall. Let's notice that in the Bible. 4 of these went through rings of gold, and 1 went through the boards of the frame. Exodus chapter 26 and verse 26 beginning. Exodus chapter 26 and verse 26 beginning. And you shall make bars of acacia wood, 5 for the boards on one side of the tabernacle, 5 bars for the boards on the other side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the boards of the side of the tabernacle for the far side westward. Verse 28. The middle bar shall pass through the midst of the boards from end to end. You shall overlay the boards with gold, make their rings of gold as holders for the bars, and overlay the bars with gold. So you can see the structure coming together and the stability of the structure. The middle bar was to run through the frame. And the other ones, above and below, they were attached with your golden hooks, according to Exodus chapter 26 and verse 26. Okay, after that, we'll notice the 9 pillars overlaid with gold. And again, I'm going to say this over and over. As you see the detail in this, and as you study the detail in this, keep in the back of your mind, We are God's tabernacle today. We are God's temple today. And that's where our studies are taking us. God was this detailed for that structure. He certainly means what he means for us today. Exodus chapter 26, in verses 31 and 32, we see that there were 4 pillars were for the veil separating the holy place from the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies. So this section had 4 pillars dividing it, dividing it, and what will hold the curtains, as we'll get there in a moment. Exodus chapter 26 and verse 31, you shall make a veil woven of blue, purple, and scarlet thread and fine woven linen. It shall be woven with an artistic design of cherubim. You shall hang it upon the 4 pillars of acacia wood overlaid with gold. So there's your wood, there's your pillars. The hooks shall be gold upon 4 sockets of silver. Then in Exodus chapter 26 and verse 37, we learn that the main entrance here is going to consist of 5 pillars. Okay? And you shall make for the screen 5 pillars of acacia wood, overlay them with gold. Their hooks shall be gold. And you shall cast 5 sockets of bronze for them. Notice Exodus chapter 26 and verse 37. The rest of the structure, silver sockets, silver bases. But this main entrance, bronze, like what will be the case with the fence wrapping around. By the way, the tabernacle would have been 30 cubits by 10 cubits. 30 cubits long, 10 cubits wide, 10 cubits high. Which, given our general measurements, that would make it 45 feet long, 15 wide, and 15 high. And you can do the math on all of it. You can look at the wood, and you see that it comes up to those numbers, 30 by 10 by 10. You can look at the size of the curtains, and it comes up to those numbers, 30 by 10 by 10. And we'll notice that as well. Okay? All right, notice the curtains of the tabernacle. The curtains of the tabernacle. Exodus chapter 26, beginning in verse 1. These were decorative curtains. I'm titling these as decorative curtains. These were not the curtains hanging for the veil. These are not the veils. These curtains would have been on the inside of the tabernacle, overlined. Basically, they would have formed your ceiling and walls that you can view. Okay, now they were going to be covered up with goat's hair, which was covered up by 2 protective layerings of kind of a roof that we're going to see. But these curtains that we're describing right now in Exodus chapter 26, verses 1 through 6, when you enter into the tabernacle, they're going to be what you can see on the walls and above you. Okay? All right, beginning in verse 1 of Exodus 26. Moreover, you shall make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine woven linen. Notice that number 10. Keep that in the back of your mind. 10 curtains with fine woven linen, blue, purple, and scarlet thread with artistic designs of cherubim. You shall weave them. The length of each curtain shall be 28 cubits, and the width of each curtain 4 cubits. And every one of the curtains shall have the same measurements. 5 curtains shall be coupled to one another, and the other curtains shall be coupled to one another. You shall make the loops of blue and yarn. And so it's telling you a little bit about the loops. I'm going to move on so we can be sure to finish it today. And it talks about the clasp in verses 5 and 6. 50 loops you shall make. In verse 5, verse 6, you shall make 50 clasps of gold. So basically what you have is 10 curtains, 28 cubits in length. Okay? 4 cubits wide. You take 5 of these and you make one large curtain, one grand curtain. And then you take the other 5 and you make a second. So what it would look like if the tabernacle is 10 cubits high, 10 cubits across, 10 cubits down, that's obviously 30 cubits. So that means that this curtain would cover the top 10 cubits and then 9 cubits down each wall. So that leaves it 1 cubit from the ground all the way around. Then, of course, 4 cubits wide, 4 times 10 would be 40 cubits total. So we said that this is 30 cubits long, and the back wall, the westward wall, is 10 cubits high. So there is your 40 cubits. The first 5 would be here covering these 20 cubits. The second grouping of 5 would cover 10 cubits over the most holy place, and then 10 cubits going down the back wall, and it would clasp together at the veil of the holy, where the most holy place meets the holy place. Okay? Notice this. Go to Exodus chapter 26 and verse 6. The 2 curtains met and clasped together at the veil dividing the holy place from the most holy place. Notice what the verse says. You shall make 50 clasps of gold and couple the curtains together with the clasp so that it may be one tabernacle. God has always been concerned with our unity. It's not just a New Testament thing. It's not just a in the church thing. It has always been. It has always been that way. God has always wanted our fellowship with Him and our fellowship with one another. And even in the blueprint for building this tabernacle, He says, okay, you have 10, and you take 5 of the 10 and you make one grand curtain. You take the other 5 of the 10, you make another grand curtain. You pull them together, and it wasn't just by chance. They clasped together at the very spot that the holy place meets the most holy place. All of this is by design of our great God. All right, moving on, so I don't run out of time here. The goat's hair curtains. So you have this one layer of decorative curtains that you can see from the inside. Over that, you're going to find the goat's hair curtains. Exodus chapter 26, verses 7 through 13. Exodus chapter 26, verses 7 through 13. You shall also make curtains of goat's hair to be a tent over the tabernacle. You shall make 11 curtains. So you see the other one was 10 curtains. This one is 11 curtains. The length of each curtain shall be 30 cubits. The other ones were 28 cubits. These are 30 cubits, so that means they're going to reach all the way to the ground, all the way around. And the width of each curtain, 4 cubits. So the width is the same, but you have an extra one. Instead of 40, now you have 44 cubits. So 11 curtains shall all have the same measurements. And you shall couple 5 curtains by themselves and 6 curtains by themselves. And you shall double over the 6th curtain at the forefront of the tent. So you're leaving 4 extra cubits at the front. You're leaving 4 extra at the front. And then so the rest of the remaining 40 will cover the 20 of the holy place, 10 of the most holy, and then the back walls 10. And then, of course, all the walls. The difference being, these curtains, the goat's hair curtain, they're going to go all the way to the ground. So a cubit all the way around at the bottom is going to be exposed. Okay? And these two, you'll notice, they would have clasped together at the veil. Everything met at the veil, dividing the holy place from the most holy place. Next, the covering, or what we might call the roof of the tabernacle. Exodus chapter 26 and verse 14. So what you have to bring us up, we have the base, we have the walls, we have the bars going through the walls to help with the stability. We have the curtains on the inside that would have not have been for the weather protecting, more of the decorative look once you come in. But now we're going to put a couple of layers of roof on the top, okay? Exodus chapter 26 and verse 14, and the Bible is not nearly as detailed about this as it is the other curtains and the framework. This 2-layer covering consisting of ram's skins dyed red and badger skins, if you're reading from the New King James text. The ESV calls them goat skins. The ASV calls them seal skins. So one way or another, it was a protective covering, okay? I thought it was interesting. I was just kind of checking a bunch of different Bibles and seeing what all had to say, and I noticed the NIV simply said, another type of durable leather. They just, one said, maybe badger skins or seal skins or goat skins, and they said just a durable leather. So what you have on top of the goat skin covering, you have now the ram skin dyed red. So this is your protective part. And then another type of protective cover to serve as the roof. Okay? What does it say? You got it? Porpoise. Yes, I left that one. Porpoise skin, the New American Standard. That's right. I did not put that in my notes, but you're right. Yeah. So you'll see some different ideas there. What it boils down to, it was a protective type roofing. So hey, if you need roof work, you go get porpoise or something like that and see what happens. Moving on, the doors for the tabernacle or the veils. Okay, we've been talking about this. The veil at the entrance of the tabernacle was designed to be decorative, hanging upon the 5 pillars overlaid with gold. We've already looked at that. And the bases of bronze. Exodus chapter 26, verses 36 through 37 tells you about what they did to make this door, if you will, the veil, the first veil. The Hebrews writer alludes to it as the first veil. The screen, verse 37, you shall make for the screen 5 pillars of acacia wood. So it's just a separation, but where they could walk through. Next, the second veil, the veil dividing the holy place from the most holy place. This also was decorative. It hung over 4 pillars overlaid with gold hooks and bases. You can see in Exodus chapter 26, verses 31 through 33. And notice on verse 33. Verse 33, and you shall hang the veil from the clasp. Then you shall bring the ark of the testimony in there behind the veil. The veil shall be a divider for you between the holy place and the most holy place. And of course, that's something we'll see again in the temple. And you remember the veil is ripped in the temple when our Lord is crucified. All right, moving on, the court fence. The court fence. The outer area, okay? The dimensions, 100 cubits long by 50 cubits wide by 5 cubits high. So about 150 feet long, 75 feet wide, 7.5 feet high. Exodus chapter 20. We're moving to Exodus 27 now. If you want to go to Exodus 27. The length of the court shall be 100 cubits, the width 50 throughout, and the height 5 cubits, made of fine woven linen, and its sockets of bronze. Exodus chapter 27 and verse 18. All right? For the court fence, the south side, Exodus chapter 27, verses 9 and 10. The south side used 100 cubits, was 100 cubits long with curtains. It took 20 sockets and pillars of bronze and hooks and bands of silver. Exodus 27, 9 and 10. The north side was the same as you read in verse 11. 100 cubits long, 20 sockets and pillars. The west side, and this west side back here, the west side, 50 cubits long with curtains, 10 pillars, and sockets. Again, the sockets were made of bronze. The east side, where the entrance is, up here, it's also 50 cubits long. This middle section is 20 cubits, where you'll have a door lock or a veil for them to get in. So 20 cubits, and you have 15 on each side. So 15 is 30, of course. 30 and 20 is 50, giving you your dimensions, or giving you a total of 50 cubits. So the east side, 20 cubit gate with 15 cubits of curtains, 3 pillars, 3 sockets on either side. And that is in Exodus chapter 27 and verse 16. The gate, Exodus chapter 27 and verse 16, 20 cubits of decorated curtains with 4 pillars and 4 sockets. The bands and hooks of silver holding it all together, and the sockets and the pegs were all of bronze, were used to stabilize the fence. Exodus chapter 27, verse 17 and 19. So in all, there were 60 pillars with a space of 5 cubits between each. A couple of things. I know that was a lot of information. I'd be happy to make you a copy of the notes or send you a copy if you like it. But if we don't understand God's detail for this, we'll not understand the rest of the tabernacle and worship and sacrifices, and we won't fully understand what He expects from us. So thank you for your time and your patience for letting me be here with you today and looking at this, and we'll have our break, meet again at 10 for worship.